Good evening, everyone. We are delighted to invite you all to the second episode of the Sustainability series organized by the Office of Marketing and Communications at Shiv Nadar University. We have the award winning wildlife and natural history filmmaker, the very famous Akanksha Singh, member of the advisory board of the Jackson Wild and the Juror International Emmy Awards, with us today. And a very warm welcome to you, Akanksha. It's such a pleasure having you with us. Our students are so excited to have you on board. And of course, they would have been more excited if you would have been physically with us on campus. But nevertheless, I think the interaction now is going to be very enlightening and exciting. So, welcome aboard. And I am joined by Janvi, who's one of our SNU students who's going to co-host the program with me. So welcome to you, Janvi, as well. And over to Janvi for a detailed introduction about Akanksha.
Thank you so much for that, ma'am. Akanksha Singh is India's premier multi-award winning natural history filmmaker who's known for her extreme passion and brilliant storytelling. With over 2 decades of work experience that covers a range and breadth of film production, she's been documenting some of the most rare and endangered species across India. Her films have been televised across the globe, not just for strong stories, but also breathtaking visuals, and also for her empathy of her work that creates towards the natural world and exposes the need for conservation. Among the 250 plus awards and nominations, she has won 4 national film awards by the President of India, a UN Film Award, and recently the Global Icon for Mass Media 2020 and the Diversity Leader Award 2020. She is also on the advisory board for Jackson Wild and a juror for the International Emmy Awards. We're so happy to have you among us here, ma'am. And I shall share my screen so that you can take over the presentation.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure. I must confess that I love interacting with students, senior school students and college students, because wildlife filmmaking as a career option, people don't really think about it. And versus when I started 20 years ago, today what the scenario is, it has changed so drastically, and there is so much to explore, no matter what background you come from. So yes, I'm happy to take over. We've had a little bit of an issue here because I Google Chrome doesn't, Microsoft Teams doesn't work on my laptop very well. So Janvi is helping me with my presentation. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So about us, I am Akanksha Singh, as I've been introduced. I have a production company that's called The Gaia People. We are a documentary production house, an independent documentary production house based here in the Delhi NCR region, more specifically in Noida. And we have been making wildlife films personally over 20 years now. My husband, my partner, he's been doing this for 25, 26 years. The company Gaia People has been around since 2011. Before that, we worked for other companies, for other production houses, for other producers and directors. But in 2011 is when we said that, if we don't form our own company and work under our own name, our own banner, it's never going to happen. But now is the time to do it. And that's how it started. Primarily doing natural history content. If you look at our career graph, we've done some of the biggest blue chip natural history films that have come out of India in the last 20 years. And now moving away from the megafauna and the blue chip work that you may have seen, and also kind of trying to make conservation storytelling, conservation films a little bit more focused and giving them a platform on television across the world. Janvi, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, you can just skip to the next one. Who am I? I am actually a person who does a lot of things, and I think that's what kind of shapes me as a storyteller, as a filmmaker. I am primarily a mother now of two children. Both my children go to Shiv Nadar School. I am a film. I'm a writer, I'm a blogger, I'm a traveler, I'm an entrepreneur, and I am a DIY specialist. When I say DIY specialist, I'm absolutely into upcycling, recycling, sustainable living, organic farming, rooftop farming, the whole gamut of it. I experiment a lot. In fact, a couple of years back, my friend and I had started a very successful skincare company made out of organic homemade skincare company, and it kind of didn't take off too much for the 2 3 years it was in existence. It did very well, but because of all my traveling, we had to shut shop. We couldn't just cope up with me missing from the kitchen, so to say, for 8 months and 9 months or in a row. So yeah, that kind of sums up the 20 years of who I am and what I do. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, over the 17, 19, now 20 years, I have done work across everything when it comes to films. Ad films, feature films, Bollywood, Hollywood, studio shows, magazine shows, news coverage, documentaries also very special, reality shows, uh, working on all kinds of budgets, from really minuscule, do make your own microfilm, to a very, very big billion-dollar projects I have worked on. My work has been televised across the globe on all major platforms. I think leaving Netflix right now, everywhere else, I have had my films showcased. Yes, between Praveen and me, Praveen Singh, my husband, and I, we have, won a lot of awards. I think the highlight, I would say, would be the national awards we have got from the President of India, and also being nominated for the Green Oscars, the Widescreen Film Festival. We haven't won it yet, but I'm sure somewhere down the line it'll come home.
Absolutely. All the best, and really a proud moment, I'm sure, to get the award from the President of India. It's
Yes,
really, yeah.
yes. In fact, the first award that I got from the President of India was not for a wildlife film. It was actually a human interest film that I had made called The Pad Piper. It's a story of Arunachalam Murganandam, who made these low-cost sanitary pads for women and inspired the Bollywood film called The Padman.
Okay. Oh,
So, yeah, I was the one to make the first documentary film on him, and that is what won me my first two national awards. Uh, if you want, you can play the trailer of that
yes,
film
we love
from.
to. Yes. Can we
Yes,
right now?
yes, yes. Why not?
So that's the little history behind the Padman, yeah, which none of us really know.
Yes, yes.
Ma'am,
That's
is it
yes.
one of the links that you've sent, or do I search it up
I
separately?
can I can send it to you right away if you want. Yeah, I mean, factually, unfortunately, the market in India for documentaries is not very nice. We don't kind of get to watch documentary films on a television. We don't have any network that supports documentary. It's very, very fiction and Bollywood oriented. But I'm glad that a film like The Padman came out, because it kind of, you know, put spotlight on the issue that I was trying to highlight through my film. So Should I put it on the chat?
Sure, ma'am.
Yes, here it is.
If the audiences has any questions for Akanksha, please pen them down in the chat box. I'm sure she'll take it up at the end of the presentation that she's showing. And we're looking forward to some more short videos and trailers of more of your movies, And she also has of course, an Instagram page called the Gaia People. Am I correct?
Yes.
So for more updates on her work, I think we can log on to the Instagram page and have a look at that as well.
Hi, is the screen visible right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me know if the audio is clear.
It makes a nasty smell. Then I have a blood stain also in my cloth. I'm having a title now, like the first man who set foot on the moon. The moment you say Muruganandam, oh, he is the man who wore the pad first time in the world. In India, only 2% of women in rural area they are using sanitary pad. They are using papers and rag cloths. Husk, dust, sand, whatever absorbing, everybody is using. I saw my wife is not using sanitary pad. Then I saw my sisters are not using sanitary pad. The other women in my family, in my village, in my state, in my country. Out of imagination, I spent a trial and error method another 4.5 years. I made a small machines to process the same raw material what they are processing in a big plant. I'm succeeded to make a world-class napkin at my small plant. But to share this happiness, I don't have anybody with me. I share this happiness in front of mirror with my dog only.
Oh, that's interesting. Very nice. The Pad Piper.
Yes, the Pad Piper. So he has this huge following of women in India, in rural India, and obviously some countries abroad as well, where his machines are going. And it's also a way of livelihood for women. Getting it's easier as a cooperative, as a self-help group for women in rural India to kind of apply for a loan, buy his machine, and then make sanitary pads. So it actually won the national award for a in the science and technology category. Though for me, it'll always remain a human interest film, and my first film as an independent, full-fledged director. That was my debut. So and that was the reason where I said that if I don't have my own company and my own brand now, it'll never ever happen.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, you can move ahead. So, Praveen Singh, my partner, my husband, we met in fact, he's the reason why I am here. I just graduated out of college, done part of my post graduation in Bombay from Xavier's. I kind of left it midway because I worked with Ogilvy and Mehta O&M in Bombay in advertising. Came back to Delhi, was between jobs, and I met Praveen, and he was studying wildlife filmmaking from the US. He'd come down to do his student film, and I assisted him on that. And it's just from then on we've off and on we've been working the first 10 years together on some of his projects, and then after we got married on our own projects. So he's in a lot of ways the person who's made me who I am today.
Great, absolutely.
We complement each other in a very nice way because he takes care of all the technical stuff where I take care of all the creative stuff, and there's a huge I would say uh, balance, that gets kind of created. Both of us have very, very different styles of working, and we obviously do not agree a lot of times with each other. But all the films that you see we've done together, it's really been the best of our minds and our talent put together.
Yeah, I can see that he's, of course, made some national films on the Indian leopards, the killing fields, Asiatic lions, and the roll call. So, where are all these films? Are they on YouTube or are they? I mean, if the students want to have a look, or of course, if we like to share with our environment clubs on campus, how does one get access to all of these? And of course, how did you all get interested in making films on environment, other than, of course, the social topics that you just talked about, the Padman and other things? So how did you both get that interest, to?
So, uh, you know, uh, for me, I think my interest was films. When I look back at my 40 years of existence, I think it was television that came into my life when I was a really small child, 5 or 6 years old. uh, I was completely enamored by television. I just couldn't stay away from it. And after that, I think in my teenage years is when I got exposed to cable television, and that is when networks like National Geographic came into my life. And I wanted to do what I saw on TV. I wanted to be making that kind of a film. But growing up back in the 90s, honestly, nobody had a clue as to how to guide me. Forget filmmaking. This whole industry of wildlife was something where nobody thought you could make a career in. You know, it's like, yeah, you go for a safari to the forest, you go visit forests, you go to different forests, all of that. We lived in places, Wellington in Tamil Nadu, in the hills, uh, in the Nilgiris, and we were constantly surrounded by wildlife. But one just did not know how to make a career out of it. It was always in the back of my head. I went on to in school. I was a pure science student. Okay, I wanted to be a doctor till grade 11. Then somewhere I just kind of dropped the idea. Then at 12th I said I want to be an engineer. My parents told me that it's very, very tough. You got to take a lot of these coaching classes. I went to a couple of them, and it was just too exhausting. It was exhausting. I don't know how many entrance exams I may have given. I think I did excellent in all of them, but obviously I didn't get through anywhere. My parents were keen that I do an MBA. I was keen on going and doing advertising from Xavier's in Bombay, and that kind of worked well. But midway through my advertising course, my post graduation that I was doing, I got an internship with Ogilvy and Mather. And I realized within a month, I realized all the 6 months that I had spent learning this course had really taught me nothing versus what I was learning on the job. And I just dumped my course halfway through, and I took up full time employment. This was back, I think, in 2001. Yes. And I think the recession was just setting in, and I kind of had to quit and come back to. I was in Bombay at that time. I had to quit and come back to Delhi. My parents were here. Couldn't get a job very easily. Got an opening in Dilip Cherian's company, Perfect Relations, one of his subsidiaries, Image Inc., and I became a PR executive. And I was really good at it, but my heart wasn't in what I was doing. The first 3 months were okay, and from the fourth month onwards, I started every month I would put in my papers saying that, I don't know what I want to do, but this is definitely not something that I want to do. All right. And I would get promoted, a salary hike, and all of that because I was good at what I was doing. Eventually, after 9 months, I put in my papers and I said that I have a job with a production house as a writer, and I am going. They were like, okay, we'll make you head of the writing team. I was like, nah, I'm going. I really am going. I had nothing in hand. I was serving my notice period, and it was in the last week of that notice period, that month, that I met Praveen. He was looking for an assistant for his leopard film that he was doing in India, and And yeah, that's how we connected. I worked as his assistant on his leopard film. Three versions were made for it: one for Nat Geo,
Award-winning wildlife and natural.
one for Discovery, and that's how it kind of started for me. And obviously, he comes from a background where his father is from the first batch of the Indian Forest Service. He's been surrounded by the wild forever. I think from the time he was born. He's moved in that circuit. So being in the wild is something that was first nature to him, and he was very, very adamant, I would say, in pursuing a career. In fact, he kicked his government job with the Wildlife Institute of India to go and pursue his master's in wildlife filmmaking in the US.
Wow. So your
One
stories
seems to be
quite the
heavy.
adventurous types where you could probably, hop over from one place to another, and you took that, risk of not sticking onto a typical 9 to 5 job. Am I correct? So it's just,
Very
but
true.
students
Yeah.
even now they're very unsure of what they want to do after college. So in spite of spending 4 years in an engineering college, they suddenly realize, oh no, my passion lies in movies or photography. So so there is an inspiration here that you take the risk and you can make it big, right?
You can take risks early on when age is on your side. The older you get, your risk taking capabilities kind of decrease. Once you get married, once you have children, the dynamics change tremendously. So whatever experimentation you want to do, whatever risks you want to take, all these experiments are great while you're in college, while you're doing your engineering or even your postgrad, because a lot of opportunities come your way until you don't kind of you know, uh, experience these opportunities, play around with them, you wouldn't know where your strengths lie, where your interests lie. And it's very different 20 years ago versus what it is now. We didn't have these options. In a lot of ways, I say I made this career for myself. Yes, I did want to do it. I'm very lucky. I would say I'm one of those few people who are being able to monetize my passion. Not everyone's able to do that. Filmmaking aside, photography honestly is extremely tough as a career to make money off. Even as a wildlife filmmaker, we're constantly, when there's work, there's a lot of work, there's good work. Yes, there's money coming in, but when there's no work, there is no money coming in, and we have a whole house to run. So it does get very tough. As glamorous as it looks, it requires a lot of hard work. You can go to a film school, you can learn on the job. There are a lot of options available, but it does require a lot of dedication and a lot of changes in your character, in your personality. You will potentially undergo if you want to, take this up as a career option. I think nature kind of grows in you. It's very easy to adjust. 4 months in a forest, 6 months in a forest, or even 10 days in a forest, when we come back, we find it very difficult to adjust to city life. This is our own home. We live in our own home, but it's difficult. And I can't tell you how difficult the last 1.5 years have been of not being able to step out and go anywhere.
Yeah. So any action, any movies made or none at all in the last one and a
No,
half years?
nothing at all. We do this series in as a co-production with HCL and the Habitats Trust called On the Brink.
Oh,
So,
yes. My children love it completely. In fact, that's the reason I got to know about you. So
oh,
they've watched
okay.
all episodes and they've become wildlife lovers. They just love nature, animals, flora, fauna, you name it, and they know it. So tell us something about On the Brink. I remember Roshni talking about that, and we sharing the links of On the Brink with our SNF community. So just a little bit about On the Brink. And then I think Janvi has a couple of questions which the students have already mailed to her, from all over
Okay.
the country, because obviously we're in a pandemic and the college is not open yet. But yes, so tell us about On the Brink. It's a very exciting series, which I think everybody should definitely give it a watch.
So on the brink, like I was saying, our career graph has been such that we have worked in a lot of blue chip films that came out of India. We've covered what we call is the megafauna, the lions, the tigers, the leopards, the elephants, the big animals that you see in on television from India. I always say this one thing, that for everything else that you see in India, there's competition sitting in Africa. And for some strange reason, the wildlife market is such, and it's also a whole lot of actually factors that contribute to it. Is it's easier to film in Africa versus filming in India.
Oh.
Yes, because the landscape here is very different. It's not open grasslands like you see in Africa. Also, the bureaucracy, the government machinery in India, it's not kind of easy working with that machinery to get permissions for filming. So we kind of did a lot of those films, and we reached a stage in our life and we said that we got to move beyond this. There is so much to showcase that lives in the shadow of the megafauna we have in India. And even our own people, don't know about this. And I think that this change also came because of our children. They travel with us when we're on shoots, they're exposed to a lot of wildlife. And they were also constantly just seeing a tiger and a leopard and an elephant in the wild. Why? But there's so much more to show. And so we developed this series on the brink. And we're very lucky to partner with HCL and the Habitats Trust. They came on as co-production partners, and we, initially the first season that we did, it was a gamble for everyone because conservation is not something that sells on television. No OTT platform like Netflix or Amazon wants to show conservation, right? So the onus falls on creating something that is interesting. All right, given that it was the first season, it was putting a very boring topic like conservation on television. We decided that we have a presenter, a young person who young India can identify with, and we got a brilliant presenter for the first season. It did very well. It went on air on Discovery and Animal Planet, both simultaneously. And we decided that it's now a format that can be taken over the years as something to showcase and, pray, bust a lot of myths around. Obviously, there's this huge thing in our wildlife circuit, that native people from countries like India, especially scientists, researchers, people working in the field, don't make very good presenters. And that's really something that we went after in season 2. It's going to come on air on National Geographic very soon. In fact, 2 episodes from season 2 are on Hotstar. It's under the Planet Possible title on Disney Hotstar. The Gharial and the Pangolin episode from On the Brink season 2. So everyone can watch those 2 episodes. And the other 8 will get released, I think, in the next 1 month.
Wow.
Yeah. So season 2 is very different from season 1. Again, it's obviously exploring a lot of megafauna, a lot of wildlife that we don't usually see or know about. And the other change that we did is we made the scientists the presenters of that particular episode. So in the pangolin episode, you have a biologist who's working on pangolins who becomes the presenter for that episode. It's the story of the pangolin, of the landscape, of the threats, of everything through him. And the 2 episodes that have released, the Gharial and the Pangolin episodes, they both are being received very well. I'd say from whoever's watched it, it's great feedback coming. So the one thing that we figured out that you can make and sell anything on television as long as your storytelling is different, your storytelling is brilliant. And that's where the catch is, because any people, you and I, can make films on tigers. How do we say which is a better film? you know it's the way you tell your story and the way I tell my story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The art of storytelling is nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Ma'am, so I had a question. that came up, which was that with better access to OTT, as you've mentioned, how do you inspire a sense of ownership towards consumption of sensible media such as documentaries over entertainment and just gags that you can easily access and that requires using less of your energy?
So, who said this question? Um, uh, so basically, what you're saying is that non-fiction. So there's fiction and there's non-fiction, right? Non-fiction takes a lot more time and can take as much time, as many resources and budgets as fiction does. You have blockbuster films also, that are made in wildlife and environment. Uh, God, that question was so long. Can you repeat it?
How to inspire a sense of ownership towards sensible media and like picking documentaries over movies that are just like
Okay,
gags and all of
so
that?
if you're looking at what choices you need to make, you need to kind of see what is the content you're consuming online. All right, if you're a Pokemon fan, all right, do you know that every Pokemon is inspired from an actual living being in the wild? Even if that Pokemon is a mishmash of two or three creatures, those are real creatures. Why don't you start with exploring, reading about them, looking up little videos about them? You know, the advantage of the 21st century is that today anyone can be a filmmaker. You and I, anyone can be a filmmaker. We can make films on our phones. We don't need to approach a big television network or an OTT platform to showcase our work. Social media is there to just put out our content and reach a lot of people. Eventually, but eventually the question is, what are you doing with your content? You know, is it just to go viral and get 500 people liking your content and following your account, or do you want to make a difference? When you want to make a difference, your storytelling style has to change a lot. There are films that are advocacy films, there are conservation messages, there's a call to action: do this, do this, do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. They preach a lot. People switch off automatically. In the last 1.5 years, if you see, the consumption of media of media on OTT platforms has increased a lot, and people are switching off from reality. Honestly, no one is watching a documentary, even wildlife for that matter. Yes, big budget films do get released even on OTT platforms, but no one's watching them as much as they're watching other shows, because there is somewhere at the back of your head a subconscious thing sitting that these films preach. And that is why content today is undergoing a massive change. Yes, tell us the story about how a bulb was invented, but how differently can you tell that story? You know, and there will be people watching it. If you look at Penguin Towns, I'm telling you, there are enough. It's a series that's just released on Netflix. There are enough films on penguins, documentary films on penguins. Penguin Town just happens to be a new way of telling the story of penguins. More relevant to the 21st century in terms of technology and storytelling, and more relevant to the audience that is consuming this content, which is a lot more youngsters are, versus what it was earlier. And also, obviously, coming in the time of the middle of a pandemic, it's family viewing as well. So I think it's a conscious decision that you got to make. The content is available, and as a consumer, if you send in your feedback to networks, and if a lot more feedback networks receive that they want to watch nonfiction, they want to watch documentary, whether it's war documentaries, human interest films, or nature films, environment films, platforms, broadcasters, networks will pay attention because you are their audience. You are the audience. Advertising revenue comes from all the ads that you see on these platforms and on television. Okay, if people are not going to watch that network, that channel, no one's going to, advertise on that. There's going to be no revenue flowing through that network. So if you want it, you can demand it, but the demand has to be a lot. It can't be one person constantly writing to Doordarshan and saying, shift your timing from Sunday 10:30 to like a Friday 7 o'clock for the nature programs that you show. No, it can't be one person. It has to be a substantial population writing religiously and regularly, and it will happen.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sure constant feedback will make a difference. And ma'am, another question that came up was, what would you describe the story writing process like? Because yes, you have a concept, but animals are not paid actors. They have a mind and a will of their own. How would you adapt your story, or how do you go into the field itself to make sure your story works the way you planned it on your storyboard?
Okay, there are lots of ways of doing this. All right. One is you just go into the field and you sit there for the next 3 or 4 years of your life. You can make wildlife films in 2 or 3 days also, and you can make wildlife films over a period, one film over a period of 10 years also. It depends on what your story is and what you're trying to say. Uh, it all starts with research, and Google is not the answer when it comes to research, especially when it comes to wildlife. All right, there are people who work in the field. There are scientists, there are biologists, there are researchers, there are grassroots people who interact with wildlife every day, and they are the people who give you research material, or they tell you stories based on which you get inspired to tell a story, right? We all know Ranthambore has great tigers. It's a beautiful landscape. Visually, you get stunning footage from there. And but what's the story? Is it just another tiger, a tigress who has cubs, and who, how she trains her cubs and how she raises them, and the cubs, they grow up, they leave the mother, or they throw the mother out of the territory and take over the territory? What's the story? Don't you think that story has been done again and again and again? How can you give it a twist? So, what was the question? Sorry, what was the question again?
The story writing process,
Story
essentially.
writing process. So it starts with research. All right. We talk to a lot of people. We do recce trips. We spend time in the forest to understand what is going on with the animals. This is something when we do blue chip films. All right, blue chip are films where you don't see people. They're more centric on animal behavior. There's a film that I did called Tigris Blood. It is on Discovery. I think there's a pirated version of it available online on YouTube as well. Otherwise, you can write to me and I can send a link. So Tigris Blood was a film that we actually went out to do a series of short films on tigers, like a soap opera on tigers, is what the idea was. And we had spent a couple of months in the forest when we realized that these four sisters that we were following, they'd reached an age where now they had to leave their mother and move on, make their own territory. So either they overthrow the mother, or they over the dominant ones, or push out the weaker ones and take control of the territory, or they kind of venture out and find another place for themselves, right? The four of them had left the mother and ventured out to find their own space, make their own territory, and they were not successful in hunting properly. Now there are literally adult tigers, about 3.5 years of age, all females, four of them, and tigers, we know, don't live together like lions do. They're independent, solitary creatures. They only come together when they have to meet. But these four sisters, having tried to live independently, failed miserably, and came back together and started hunting together as a pack. Now, that was something very unusual. And that was not something, trust me, anyone could have told us. It happened because we had the resources and the time to spend in the field, and we found this story, right? A lot of storytelling in wildlife actually happens in the post production of a film. You go out with an idea, you go out with a script, you go out with a storyboard, but what you get in the field is not in your control. It's not predictable. You can just not say what's going to happen, right? So there are other ways of making a story where you have a script and you film and edit everything according to that script. I don't know if people have seen this series, which was on National Geographic called Monkey Thieves. It's a long running series on National Geographic. I think it went over a couple of seasons as well. Maybe 8-9 years old. This series is. Look it up, Monkey Thieves. It's a completely scripted show. It's based on facts. It's based on reality. It is how monkeys behave in and around Jaipur, Jodhpur. But it's hugely entertaining. They scripted the whole thing out and they shot and edited everything according to that script. That's another way of storytelling, you know. But yeah, mostly I would say wildlife films are put together as a story in post production, in editing.
That's a wonderful insight. I did not think about it in the opposite aspect, which I honestly did not think about myself, that the two ways to look at it. Ma'am, I'll ask you one last question before we can continue with your presentation, which is, what is your favorite animal that you would like to capture?
I mean, every animal is my favorite. We're working on the Brink season 3 right now, and I'm getting extremely enamored with the creatures underwater, because season 3 is now going to expand a bit, and we're going to go into the oceans of India and explore underwater. So I think that's where my kind of interest lies. I love every creature. There's no such thing as favorite or not favorite. I'm not biased towards tigers as much as a lot of people are. In fact, every time I have done season on the brink, the, my favorite becomes the animal that I'm filming at that particular time.
Okay. Can we have a glimpse of the On the Brink? Is the trailer here? Is the link here? For all our audience to see.
Season 1, I think, would be available. Season 2 may not be available. I can send you the link for season 2. Just hold on. Actually, you should see that.
Anybody else has a question for Akanksha, please unmute yourself and ask.
I have a question. I am Meha
I
here.
think.
So you rightly pointed out that documentaries are not very well screened on Indian television network. That's like more on the government, the DD television. So as an influencer, is there something that you think things could work from your end to push the authorities, or in some way possible, or what is it to go forward about it? Why I ask is because if you look at the OTT platforms and even the cable network, of course the cable network has expanded for the last many years now, but OTT platforms are like maybe probably they cater 1 to 2 or maybe 5% at max the population, if I'm not wrong. I don't have the exact figures. So the rest of the population, like, of course, they also have the equal right to know about or even to explore this arena of either wildlife or conservation, recycling, etc., like the themes that you are mostly interested in. So how is it that you think that something could be, you could influence this media channels or something?
So, as a person who makes these films, what we do is we ensure that these films are distributed around the world and shown across as many countries, as many states, as many networks as possible. All right. Now, every channel is different. NDTV, for example, is predominantly a news channel. They do have a documentary slot, or they used to have a documentary slot, but I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if it still runs. But they primarily their focus is something else, right?
Right.
You do have a couple of networks, say like Discovery and National Geographic in India. So we ensure that our work is shown on these platforms. We also ensure that our work goes to our terrestrial network, that is Doordarshan, and it is shown whatever the slot that DD decides. That's not something we can influence. Yeah, we are trying to make our work more accessible and more relevant by putting it on OTT platforms. And that means that we have to, and we are working on it, is to change and make our storytelling style much better that an OTT platform says, yes, I want your story. They're willing to commission anything, but the storytelling, the way you tell your story has to be drastically different versus what you see on an Animal Planet or a Discovery or a National Geographic. So I would say we also give a copy of our films to the forest departments across India. Okay, we don't always have the capability to translate it into different languages, regional languages, but we definitely give an English and a Hindi version of our films to the forest department. And a lot of times the forest department gets those films dubbed into the regional language to showcase it to the people at the grassroots level. And those are very important audience for us as well.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so should we move ahead with your presentation and maybe have a look at the Brink
Yes,
series?
I'm just sending you the link for the second season of On the Brink, the promo. Here is the link to it, and if it asks for a password, it shouldn't ask for a password. Yeah, that's the link to it.
Janvi, are you able to play it?
Ma'am, the link hasn't come from me on the chat. Just give me a second.
Students were keen to know, Akanksha, if they could work with you as interns and get a first-hand experience.
Across sweeping plains and wetlands, in thick forests, India's magnificent wildlife lives free. Without them, our world will be a lesser place. Now, our actions are taking their homes, threatening their future. They are our hope, and we are theirs.
Wow, that's lovely. So they're available on YouTube?
No, 2 episodes are on Hotstar. I can send the link to you, which you can circulate to everybody if you want. They're on Disney Hotstar, 2 episodes.
So going ahead, of course, since you're already working on the third series of On the Brink, how about getting some students from our photography club or our nature club to work as interns with you? I'm sure most of them have the eyes and the, on this opportunity. So if there is ever, we would love to get in touch with you and,
Definitely. We're not stepping out in the field right now. We are researching, we're putting stories together, we're getting in touch with the scientists, finding out what's going on, figuring out if we were to probably step in the field in October or probably in February next year. We can't say right now. But yes, there are always opportunities to intern with us. As an intern, be rest assured that you will get a lot of work to do. You learn very well. I assure you that. But it's not always that we take you to the field the first time. There's a lot that needs to be done, behind the scenes that you got to get a hang of. The one reason I know, and I've seen this in the last few years, everyone wants to intern because everyone feels that they'll get to go and travel everywhere. It's not that easy. There's a lot of skill set building that one needs to do to be with a film crew in the wild. So, yes, you can always write in and find out what's going on, and we can tell you.
So, what's this one piece of advice you will give when it comes to picking up skills and multitasking for people who want to follow in your footsteps?
You think I have time to go through the last few slides that I have?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Janvi, can you move on to the next slide?
Next one, please. And the next one. We've actually discussed all of this. Yeah. Okay, so this is basically my work setting. I work with wild animals, like someone had asked, you can't predict their behavior. You cannot predict anything about wild animals. You can't even predict, you can to some extent predict accurately where it'll show up at roughly what time. But working in the wild is very different. You've got to be extremely, extremely patient. You would potentially be sitting and waiting for an animal for hours and hours, or sometimes even days, and yet you do not see it. You need to be able to work in isolation as well as be able to work with people, because filmmaking, whether it's wildlife or documentary or even a Hollywood or Bollywood blockbuster, cannot be made in isolation, really. So teamwork is very important, and it's your years in college and in school that kind of really build that foundation for you. Work setting, we deal with a lot of technology. We are now talking about filming in 8K. What our television sets at home are potentially, most of us have HD, high definition television screens, but increasingly there are 4K television screens now coming into the market. But it's very, very rapidly moving towards 8K technology now. So technology changes very rapidly in this field, and it's something that we got to keep ourselves updated with. We're in the entertainment business because we tell stories in a very, very entertaining way. Otherwise, honestly, no one's going to watch our work. Yeah. The conditions we work in are very extreme. I have been to minus 11 on day one and straight gone to 48 degrees the second day without any day's rest. Equipment goes for a toss, health goes for a toss, everything goes for a toss. But the conditions we work in are very, very extreme. And I must say, wildlife filmmaking is not for the faint-hearted. If you really want to tell great stories, do great cinema, all right, it's not for the faint-hearted. Making advocacy films, conservation films is also a skill set, and it is required. It is very important. But if you get to the core of making very, very good wildlife films, the kinds that you actually today see, Planet Earth and all the shows that on Netflix, they take a lot of time, and you have to have the patience and the resources to be able to give in that much. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So, a typical day for us in the field it starts roughly around 3:34 in the morning. That's when we get up and we have to ensure that we are the first ones into the forest. Typically around just before daybreak would be around anything between 5 to 5:30 in summers. We film till the sun kind of comes up and gets overbearing. And the whole afternoon is just rest. We look at our footage, we sleep, we eat, we talk, we discuss, and we go back into the field in the afternoon. In summers, it's very, very difficult to film because the light conditions are very harsh. There is no animal activity. The jungles are absolutely silent. All right. So morning and evening is really when we have our work, and we sleep early because in jungles in India, you're thrown out at sunset. You can't film at night. You don't get permission to stay in the forest at night. So, but we did work on two films of a series called. One is called India's Wandering Lions, and the other one is called Manas Return of the Giants, which was for the first time in India, we filmed at night in Gir forests, in Gir National Park, where lions are found, and in Manas in Assam, which had undergone a massive issue back in the 80s and 90s because of the agitation, and then the resurrection of the park, how it's come back to its almost its original form now. So these were two films that broke a lot of ground because this was the first time that night filming was done in India, and we've shown what happens in our jungles at night. And if you can get to, I think again, pirated copies are there on the internet to watch. The problem with our films is, they're for television broadcast, and television broadcast rules are very, very strict. If you have released a film online, no one is going to watch it on TV, and so TV is not going to buy it, and thus we cannot have our films online in any form unless it's a festival viewing copy or something. So you'll never get to see these films on YouTube. But yes, there are a lot of pirated copies that float around, and one can see the films. Yeah, you can skip the next slide. I discussed this. These are some of the challenges I would kind of say. We've already discussed. There's no control over the characters, the action, the environment. The pangolin episode, if you get to see on Hotstar, I, like, someone had asked about a script, right? I actually had written a script for the pangolin episode for season 2 of On the Brink, and I was really proud of it. And I said to myself that if I ever get funding, I will make this into a big feature length film. It's that great a story. When we went into the field, 10 days had passed. We hadn't seen a pangolin in the wild.
Oh
To
my
the
God.
extent the scientists that we were studying with had not seen a pangolin in the wild for the last 2 years of his studies. And so the story had to change on field rapidly, every day, every hour. You let go 10 days thinking, oh, you'll get a shot, you'll get a shot, you'll get something, you'll get something, you'll get something. But you've got just 5 days left, and now is the time you have to, it's a do or die situation. So yeah, there was no control. We couldn't see it. We couldn't see it. There are no retakes. I cannot tell anyone, please show me your tail once again. Please flip your tail once again. Can you glare at the camera? Can you show me your teeth? Can you meet me at that particular water point tomorrow at 4 p.m.? I'll be there. The light will be perfect. It's a great winter afternoon. No, they do not come. So it's very difficult telling what can happen where. And I think that's one reason why, to make a good wildlife filmmaker, you got to have a very good understanding of animal behavior, of landscapes, of nature. And that comes from not just spending time, but I think one of the great things that helps.
I think we lost her.
I got removed from the meeting.
Oh, strange. You're back now, I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry, where were we? Yeah. So, sorry, where was I? I kind of lost my chain of
Yeah.
thought.
Challenges of being on the field and then not being able to call your star cast on time and catch them in action.
Yeah, it's very time consuming. A good natural history film which dwells into not just the issues and problems that our wildlife is facing, but also showcases behavior of animals. means spending a lot of time in the forest, in the field with these animals to understand what's going on, because each season, each natural cycle is different, you know. So films can take anyone from any time from 1 year to 3 years, sometimes even 10 years. There's been a film on snow leopards that took over 10 years to make.
Oh my,
Yeah, and it
very
also,
long time.
yes, it does. See, that's the nature of the animal. You don't get to see it easily.
And
It's
do they get terrified to see a camera or to see you all in action around them? Or you must be really have to do it very, very carefully, you know. Do
it
they get
depends.
scared?
It depends on where you're filming. So if you're filming in a national park, which a lot of people visit, trust me, animals are very used to the presence of people, the sound of cameras, clicking them all the time. They're very used to it. But then there are species which are very, very difficult to see, like the snow leopard or the clouded leopard, which very, very few people have been able to film, and you just cannot get close enough to these animals. Those are the kind of films that take a lot of time. And then again, what is the kind of story you're telling? Like I said, if it's a behavior film, you will have to spend at least one whole year with the animal to film properly the entire behavior or the life cycle of the animal, right? For a series like, say, for example, On the Brink, we spend anything between 10 days to about 2, sometimes even 3 weeks per film in the field. Post production is what can take also a very, very long time. Typically, for a 1 hour film, typically it takes about 8 to 12 weeks in post production. It's very expensive. Making a wildlife film is not cheap, because the amount of time you have to spend in the forest, everything, there is a cost to it. There's equipment, there's a cost. You got to stay somewhere, there's a cost. You got to travel, your food, the people who accompany you, everything is a cost. The equipment is very, very elaborate. There was a time where you could just take a small little camera and make a film. That was 25 years ago. Now you got to have a drone. You got to have specialist sound recording. You got to have, a special crew doing time lapses. So there's just like this huge requirement of equipment that has come in, because the boundaries of storytelling have to be pushed, have technology has to be pushed, and every film has to look better than the previous one. Yes, fundraising till date is a nightmare. There, there is no government support, at least I would say, in this country when it comes to wildlife filmmaking, unless, of course, you're making a film for the government, which then becomes a very skewed proposition, because the storytelling style is the story becomes a very one-sided story. Sometimes it's good because there's also a lot of positive work that the government does in certain places, but a lot of times it's not that great. And yes, management in general is not an easy task. Dealing with permissions is, I think, one of the biggest logistical nightmares of wildlife filmmaking. And yet here I am doing this over and over again for the last 20 years, because I can't think of doing anything else. I've I've tried my hand, I would say, at every possible genre of filmmaking, from ads to features, Bollywood, Hollywood, low budget films, all kinds of things. And this is where I have found my calling.
Lovely. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm sure you have many more years to go, and a never-ending process, because the love that you show, the passion that you show for your profession, I'm sure it's very inspiring for all of us who are watching you and hearing from you. There are many hurdles. I am sure, like you just mentioned, no retakes, and of course the environment, the nature, the animals, the character of the animals, and of course their moods, and of course the place that you go to shoot. So a lot of factors that determine your, unlike a normal Bollywood or Hollywood movie where you go, you have the set ready, the actors ready, the makeup kit ready, and there you go, shoot and come back. So this didn't seem so challenging until we heard you, of course. And
The one thing, if I have a minute,
yeah, please, of course.
the one thing, because there's students here, and I think it's a question that can arise, is should one go to film school?
Sorry, I didn't get you.
Should one go to film school?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not from film school, and my husband is from film school. And I've learned everything on the job, and he's got a very sound theoretical knowledge base. I personally have never been fond of, too much of education. I come with this spirit of learning everything on the job because that's how I did it for myself. But I would say that if you want to pick up a technical skill, um, if it's cinematography, camera work, even photography for that matter, unless it's photography something that very naturally comes to you, a lot of people would like to better their craft. If you want to be an editor, if you want to be a story writer, if you want to be a sound recordist or an animator, graphics animation person, I think film school is very good because it gives you a lot of technical knowledge that is required in those technical fields, you know. But if you want to be a director or a producer, you really don't need any qualification. You just need to know how to control all these, technicians, camera person, editors, sound recordists, graphic artists, how to make them work together to achieve the goal that you have in your head. And get your film made. So film school, yes, very good for a very good theoretical knowledge base, and if you want to definitely pick up a technical skill, I would always say go to film school. So I honestly don't regret not going because I think I took advantage of all the opportunities that came my way, and I forced myself to learn everything. I didn't know anything, but I forced myself to sit with editors and cinematographers and see how they do what they do and ask questions. Till you don't ask questions, you'll never know the answer. And don't ever hesitate in asking, thinking it just might sound very stupid coming from someone like me. No, there's nothing called a stupid question. It's stupid if you don't ask and you assume.
Got that. Yeah. So, Janvi, any more questions for Akanksha? Is the presentation done, or we have something more?
Oh, this will just go on and on. Trust me, there you'll have to spend another 2 hours with me.
Let's have a look at one of your clips of any other movie that you have, and if you'd like to tell us a little story about that as well. How was the experience of shooting that? Anything interesting that you'd like to share? Or of course, you could please go ahead with your presentation. I'm sure there's so much more to learn from it. And if the
Does
audience
anyone have a question?
Ma'am, there was one question that came up. That was about ethical filming. So, if would it be considered disrupting your surroundings when you're going up to film in the wild?
No, it's not disruptive to go and film in the wild. It's how you film can be ethical or unethical. So, for example, I have been trying to probably get a shot of a tiger, trying to eat a deer, and I don't get it. I know filmmakers have done this. They have actually caught a carcass, pulled out a carcass from somewhere and put it out in another place just to attract animals. So that's baiting, which is definitely unethical. Playing artificial sounds to attract animals is unethical just because you want to get a shot of it. And this is not just filmmaking, it also goes for photography. uh, Feeding birds, putting out food for birds, playing certain calls to attract certain species of animals, all that is unethical. There are ethics and rules of, rules of the game, if I would say, in wildlife filmmaking also. If I am following, T1 the tiger, and I'm telling you the story of T1 the tiger, who he is and how he behaves, I should always be showing you T1 the tiger and not T20 or T80 the tiger and passing it off as T1. And people do that, okay, because to the untrained eye and to the audience, it's not very easy to differentiate between two tigers who tend to be of the same build or the same size. It's difficult. unless of course there is a mark, visible identification mark on the animal. So if it's a story of T1 the tiger, ethically speaking, I should only be showing you shots and behavior footage of T1 the tiger. But if it is a general documentary on tigers, and I say, oh, tigers hunt at night, then it doesn't matter if I show you the long shot of the whole tiger. The whole tiger is T1 the tiger, and the close up or the face shot is of T25 the tiger. Then it doesn't matter because it's not specific to a particular animal, but it is in general about tigers. So there are these rules, that do exist, and one must follow them.
Ma'am, I too had a question. Can I go?
Yes.
So I had two questions. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you. This has been one of really wonderful sessions. It has been very informative, and like I could relate a lot. You see, my dad is also a documentary filmmaker, and I've seen him work so hard for months and months together in Sundarbans. And as a result, I've been to many award ceremonies, many screenings. So there's this one thing that I've noticed among like different screenings and all, is that a lot of times people end up depending heavily on file footages, and that is something that as a viewer I feel that, I mean, it could have been handled differently. So is there something like, is there a ratio that needs to be maintained, or is it absolutely necessary to use file footages to convey the story?
No, it's not absolutely necessary. It depends on your story, whether you need to dig into an archive or not, right? It really totally is dependent on your story. The animals we follow in On the Brink, unfortunately for me, the stock footage, file footage, archival footage doesn't exist for a lot of animals that I'm filming. You get all this footage available of what happened in this location 20 years back, what is the situation, all of that. I think dealing with file footage is something that has to be done very artistically. It can stand out, it can be very jarring if it's not done nicely, and does it have a relevance in your storytelling? I don't know if you've seen On the Brink season 1. There's a sequence on in the episode on red pandas. There's a sequence that we have dug out from our archives of 20 years ago, where we filmed the first wild, the zoo to wild reintroduction of red pandas. And we gave it a kind of treatment, and we put it out there as a small little, I think, a 1.5 minute sequence. But other episodes didn't have it, But there were some other episodes. I think the Black Bear, the Black Bear film episode that again had archival footage of how traditionally the conflict between bears and humans has been in the Kashmir Valley. So it really depends on your style of storytelling, whether it's required or not, and how you then artistically deal with it.
Right, ma'am. And my second question was regarding lenses. So you did mention that especially wildlife documentary making doesn't come easy and doesn't come cheap. It's pretty expensive. Uh, and I just wanted to ask, is there a control between quality and how higher the lenses could go up? Like, I've been a huge fan of Mike Pandey's films and the kind of shots that are there. So I just wanted to know if there's any relation between the two, that a quality shot could only come with a, greater gear and a greater lens.
Yes, there is. There's absolutely a direct correlation. That's why you have, 750p and 1280, 180, 1080i and 4K and 8K. All of this makes a difference. Even in lenses, you have a 70 to 200 lens, and you have a block 200 lens. A block 200 lens is going to give you a much better picture quality versus a zoom lens. And a block lens is obviously a very, very expensive affair. You get block lenses of all kinds, all companies make it. There are some companies whose block lenses are very, very good and they're very, very expensive. And some companies are not that great. Some, a lot of lenses that are used in photography can also be used with video cameras as well, film cameras, movie cameras as well. But it shows. Look at a film that even within cameras, there is such a huge range of cameras, and each camera has something that is different that has an impact on what is recorded and the final quality, the final output that comes out of it. So yes, you want to do really good, stunning work. This field unfortunately requires investment. And in wildlife, whether it's photography or film, you do need very long lenses. 100 mm, 200 mm, 400 mm is not enough.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we have a question in the chat box. Janvi, could you read it out?
Yes, ma'am. It says, Good evening. What are the opportunities to apprentice with an established wildlife filmmaker in India?
Okay. Okay, so there are a lot of opportunities. It really depends from person to person, production house to production house. What are they working on? Typically, I would say a wildlife filmmaking crew in the field is very small. Honestly, as a film director, I don't go, if it's a film that is on the behavior of the animal, there is nothing as a director that I can do. I cannot direct the animal. I cannot do anything in the field. It's all up to my cinematographer, my sound recordist, and one assistant goes with the two people to take care of things and film everything and come back with the material. And then I use my skills in post production. Okay, so as an as internship, if you want to do, a lot of people are there. There are a lot of opportunities. There are very few production houses in wildlife. Sorry, there are very few production houses, but they do exist. You need to figure out where what you want to do, and if you don't know, you will invariably be started off with research or handling production in the office or something related to post production. And trust me, as an intern, you get to a lot of times do all the boring work, which means firstly and foremostly means not going into the field. But having said that, there is a lot of difference in turning in a big production house and in turning in a small production house. In a big production house, the roles are very well defined. There are a lot of people working. All right, if you're interning in the research department, you will invariably be interning only in the research department. There will be very little overlap between the different departments. They're very compartmentalized in big production houses. In a small production house, there are few people. Everybody tends to multitask, you know. So you get the opportunity to do research also, sit on the post also. Probably if there's some local filming going on within the city, you as an intern tend to go out as an assistant with the cinematographer as well. There's a lot of overlap of, I would say, uh, opportunities to overlap and work in different departments. It happens when you're working with a small production house. If you're working or interning as under somebody, just a person, then it really depends on what the person is doing. And I would say that if you're interning under a person, try to intern through the entire life cycle of the film. If you're working just with a person and not a production house, opportunities do exist. Very few people advertise these opportunities. So I would say find out who these production houses are, find out who these people are. If you've done any photography or filmmaking, put together something. You can mail them your resume or just ask them what do they have available as internship for someone with your background. Be specific about where you're coming from, whether you have any past experience in this or you don't have, because then it helps them kind of figure out where they can fit you in the production or in the on the project.
Right.
Sorry.
Ma'am, so hello, ma'am.
Yes, now I can hear you.
Yes, ma'am. So another question that I came across was, what is your favorite piece of equipment, or like in terms of innovation? Like I remember reading about how the night camera was a huge discovery that people could now film in the night. So what is your favorite piece of equipment that you have enjoyed working with?
I love working with drones. I've tried to operate the drone myself, and in extreme pressure, I have managed to fly the drone and I've taken shots, but that's not a skill set that I have. So I do have my specialist drone pilot. I love the perspective drones give. They just change your narrative completely. Looking at everything from the above. My only grudge is that drones, one single battery doesn't last you more than 20 minutes, and that's a huge nightmare. But I love the drones, and the other and the other equipment that I really like is the Starlight Camera that we worked with for the Lion and the Manas film. So these are cameras that work in available light. Best operated if it's a full moon night, because the natural light then available is much more. But we use these cameras, the Starlight camera, which technically speaking allows you to film in starlight. You don't need to light up the forest with any kind of artificial light. I think that was another very brilliant piece of technology I worked with. Then obviously filming at night and working with thermal cameras, infrared cameras always has, just being in the forest at night is something that just completely opens up a world that we are not even used to seeing on television. Because typically in a film, the sun rises, everyone wakes up, goes about their business, hunting, dying, eating, walking, making babies, having babies, teaching babies, and then going back to sleep as the sun sets. But no, life in the forest actually happens at night. It plays out at night. And so if you ever get the opportunity to be in the wild at night, just keep quiet, listen, and look.
Yes,
That's
ma'am, that
interesting.
sounds
That's
wonderful.
really interesting. We really hope to go with you for one of your wildlife photography trips, or your filmmaking trips. We have an adventure club on campus. I'm sure they'll have a great time with all your adventures around the place. But
I'll
thank you.
come once this all is over. I'll come to the university.
You have to. You must. I'm sure there'll be so many in person around you to ask you, much more than what we have. By the way, we still have a list of questions, but we'll wrap it up now. We've taken too much of your time.
I'm
And
happy to be online and take another few questions if time allows. I don't know if it
any of
does.
the audiences have any more questions, but definitely you can get in touch with her on her Instagram handle, the Gaia People, and connect with her online, and probably mail her, and we'll share the link of On the Brink series to everybody, so that all those who haven't yet watched it must give it a watch. And with another month of holidays that you all have, you could read more about, study more about wildlife, and develop an interest about the same. But thanks again, Akanksha. It was such a pleasure having you on board. And Janvi, any words from you for Akanksha?
Honestly, just I have been fascinated with photography and wildlife myself as a child. I mean, our routine at home was, instead of TV, my mom would put up Nat Geo Discovery and ask me to watch it, and that's where I learned to love nature, and it has made me who I am. So it started off with me crying because I wanted to watch Disney at that time, but now I would actively, consciously, I end up to watching documentaries a lot. So it was just really insightful to see what exactly happens in the behind the scenes, and just I really enjoyed this a lot.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to connect with everybody and answer their questions. Yes, write to me, find out if their internship's happening, and we figure something out.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Akanksha.
Thank you.
Stay safe, and we'll stay connected for sure.
Yes, thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Bye.
Bye.